How to trigger an avoidant to realize your worth. Let me tell you something that might just shift your entire world. You don't need to chase love to prove your value. You need to stand so powerfully in your truth that love has no choice but to recognize it. We've all met someone who runs when the moment connection gets too real. They pull back, shut down, and leave you questioning everything. You think it's you, don't you? You think if you could just say the right thing, do the right thing, be the right person, they'll finally see your worth. But here's the truth. An avoidant doesn't fear you. They fear the mirror you hold up. You are the proof of what they haven't healed. You are the challenge to their comfort zone. So what do? They run, they detach. And you shrink, you beg, you explain. But listen, that is not your power. That is your pattern. If you want them to realize your worth, stop offering it on a silver platter. Take it back, reclaim it. Let them feel the absence of your light. Let them sit in the silence where your validation used to be. Let them wrestle with the void that your presence once filled. You don't trigger an avoidant by getting closer. You trigger them by getting clear. Clear about who you are, clear about what you deserve, and crystal clear about the fact that their inability to connect is not your responsibility to fix. When you stop explaining your worth and start embodying it, they will either rise or retreat. And here's the secret, either way you win. There comes a moment in every connection where you feel the shift, the slow withdrawal, the sudden silence, the emotional walls rising like armor. And if you're someone who deeply cares, who connects with your heart first, your instinct is to close the gap, to fix it, to rush toward them and hold the pieces together even when they've stopped reaching back. You chase not because you're weak, but because you love hard. Because your heart doesn't know how to give up on someone who once felt like home. But let me tell you something, passing doesn't bring you closer to love. It takes you further away from yourself. Every time you abandon your truth to keep someone from leaving, you teach your nervous system that your worth is conditional, that you must earn closeness by sacrificing your boundaries. And that is not love. That's a survival response. That's fear in the costume of devotion. There is a massive difference between choosing someone and clinging to someone. When you choose, you are rooted. You stand in your values, your needs, your energy. But when you cling, you dissolve, you mold, you shapeshift into whatever version of yourself seems the most acceptable to keep them close. You stop being you and start being a shadow version of what you think they'll tolerate. And what's worse, you start believing that this smaller version of yourself is all you deserve. And that's a lie, a dangerous one, because the moment you start believing the love requires self-abandonment, you step into a cycle that keeps you hungry, keeps you searching, keeps you attached to people who cannot or will not meet you where you are. You keep giving more to try to make them stay, and they keep pulling away, confirming your deepest fear, that you're too much or not enough. But the truth is, it's not about being too much. It's not about not being enough. It's about the fact that they're not emotionally available to receive the love you're offering. They're wired to retreat from intimacy, to armor up when things get too real. And when you chase that, when you try harder in response to their withdrawal, you reinforce the very pattern that keeps you stuck. The power move is not in running after them, it's in staying exactly where you are, standing, grounded, present, aligned with your self-worth, because someone who is truly meant to be in your life will not require you to chase them down a hallway of their fears. They will walk toward you, even if it's slowly, even if it's messy, but they will walk. And if they don't, that's not your failure. That's your freedom. When you stop chasing, you give the relationship back to balance. You create space. You remove the pressure. And most importantly, you put the spotlight on what's really going on. You say, I'm here, I'm willing, but I will not shrink. I will not beg. I will not prove what is already evident. I am enough as I am. That posture, that's powerful. That's magnetic. It speaks louder than any words ever could. It tells them, consciously or not, that you are not playing the same game. You are not here to relive childhood dynamics. You are not here to audition for love. You are here to build something real. And that means both people show up. Now, this doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you cut off or build a wall. It means you stay with you first. You hold your own hand while they figure out if they're ready to hold it too. And if they're not, you still win because you kept your dignity. You honored your needs. You stood instead of scrambled. In a world where so many people are afraid to be alone, afraid to be misunderstood, afraid to lose connection, standing still in your truth is the most radical thing you can do. It commands respect. It demands alignment. And most of all, it teaches others how to treat you not through words, but through your unwavering energy. You don't need to explain your value. You need to embody it. You don't need to fight for a place in someone's life. You need to take your rightful place in your own life. And from there, decide who gets access. The ones who are meant for you will never be triggered by your strength. They will be inspired by it. It's so easy to internalize someone's distance. Their silence, their shutdowns, their avoidance, it starts to feel like a reflection of your own inadequacy. You begin to think, if I were just more calm, more patient, more lovable, maybe they wouldn't pull away. You rewind the tape in your head, analyzing every moment, trying to locate the exact second you messed up. That's the loop, always wondering what you could have done to stop the retreat, to prevent the disconnection. But here's the truth, and it might sting at first, but it will also set you free. You are not the reason they disconnect. You are the reflection of what they haven't faced within themselves. Avoidants don't shut down because you're too intent. They shut down because they are too afraid of needing someone, afraid of depending, afraid of being seen and known in a way they don't feel safe with. Your presence, your openness, your vulnerability doesn't repel them because it's wrong. It repels them because it's real. And real requires responsibility, real requires intimacy, real requires the courage to be uncomfortable. And many avoidants have never learned how to sit in that discomfort without fleeing. You become the mirror. When you love with your heart wide open, you reflect everything they've buried. The childhood wounds, the suppressed needs, the unresolved fear of abandonment, the belief that if they ever truly let someone in, they will either be controlled, disappointed, or rejected. So they protect themselves not by building bridges, but by building walls. And when you keep reaching through those walls, you start to lose yourself. You think if you could just soften your voice, shrink your needs, hold your feelings back, maybe this time they won't run. But the more you try to dim your light, the less they can actually see you. The mirror gets foggy, distorted, and still they withdraw, not because you're too much, but because your love pierces through the armor they've spent a lifetime constructing. This is where everything shifts, when you finally stop making their behavior a measure of your worth. Their shutdowns are not your fault. Their silence is not your punishment. Their fear is not your burden to carry. It's theirs to face, if and when they're ready. What you are is a wake-up call, a disruption to their pattern, an invitation to grow. But you cannot be both the mirror and the healer. It's not your job to fix their reflection. Your job is to keep being real, to keep being you, to keep standing in your worth, even if it rattles them. And yes, it might. It often does. Because people who avoid intimacy aren't used to someone who doesn't beg, who doesn't chase, who doesn't morph themselves into the safe version of love. When you stay rooted in your truth, you reveal what they've been running from. You strip away the illusion that disconnection equals control. You remind them just by existing in your wholeness that love doesn't have to hurt, that connection doesn't have to mean chaos. Now, some will rise to that mirror. They will see what they've been avoiding and they will do the work, but others won't. They'll resent the reflection. They'll try to distort it, make it your fault, twist your clarity into criticism. And that's where your deepest strength comes in, the ability to not take it personally, the ability to say, I see what's happening and I refuse to lose myself in your unresolved wounds. You can hold space without holding their baggage. You can love with openness without letting it drain you. And you can absolutely walk away, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring for yourself more. It takes tremendous courage to be the mirror, to stand in love that is real and raw and honest in a world full of masks. But don't ever shrink to protect someone from their own reflection. The right ones won't run from it. They'll be drawn to it. They'll see your truth and recognize it as their own awakening. You were never the problem. You were the reminder that they have healing to do. And your presence, your authenticity, isn't something to apologize for. It's something to protect. Trying to understand there is a silent kind of exhaustion that comes showing up, constantly trying to be understood, hoping that eventually by someone who see the effort, feel the depth, and meet you where you are. But they don't. And so you give more, not because you're desperate, but because your heart is built for connection. Because you believe that with just the right words or one more act of love, they'll finally get it. But here's the harsh truth. You can't convince someone to value what they haven't learned to recognize. You can pour every ounce of your soul into a person, and if they don't have the capacity to receive it, it will spill over and evaporate. Not because your love is too much, but because they've never learned how to hold it. And that is where the energy drain begins. It doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle. You start making room for them without realizing you're shrinking your own. You accommodate their detachment by becoming hyper-available. You translate their coldness into something you need to fix. You slowly make yourself responsible for the emotional weight of the relationship, and in doing so, you lose access to your own center. Taking back your energy isn't about punishing them. It's not about closing off or becoming bitter. It's about remembering that your emotional resources are valuable, that your time, your love, your presence, it all has weight. And if someone cannot reciprocate that energy, if they keep taking and giving breadcrumbs in return, you have every right to reclaim what you've been giving away. When you stop explaining yourself to someone who isn't listening, you reclaim your power. When you stop initiating every conversation, every check-in, every moment of emotional labor, you stop bleeding out in places where you're not being refilled. And that moment, that pause, forces clarity. It forces the other person to confront the silence you used to fill. It forces them to choose, engage or drift, rise or retreat. But here's the deeper part. It forces you to come home to yourself, to stop outsourcing your worth to someone else's ability to validate you, to stop measuring love by how hard you have to work for it, and to finally sit with your own emotional needs without guilt, without apology. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. You are not unloving for wanting reciprocity. And you are absolutely not wrong for deciding that your energy deserves to be spent on people who honor it. There's a difference between being available and being emotionally. You can't build love on depletion, and you can't sustain connection when you're the only one contributing fuel. Start asking, is this costing me more than it's feeding me? If the answer is yes, step back, not as a strategy to manipulate, but as a strategy to survive, as a way to rebuild the connection you've been losing with yourself while trying to stay connected to someone else. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to stop giving, because real love, healthy love, flows in both directions. It doesn't just take. It doesn't expect you to carry the weight of two hearts while the other person hides behind fear. Your energy is sacred when you take it back. You're not closing the door. You're opening one back inside yourself. A door to peace, a door to clarity, a door to the kind of connection that doesn't leave you constantly questioning your value. We live in a world that fears silence. When someone pulls away, our first instinct is to fill the space. We send the text, we explain ourselves, we try to close the gap before it widens. Silence feels like rejection, like punishment, like something must be broken. And if we just say the right thing, we can fix it. But what if the silence isn't a problem? What if it's the most honest part of the entire dynamic? Sometimes the silence is where the truth finally breathes. When someone detaches, withdraws, shuts down, and you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop overextending, the silence that follows doesn't create distance. It reveals it. It shows you where connection was being forced, where energy was one-sided, where you were carrying the weight of communication on your back while they stood still. Silence is not empty. It's full. Answers. You see, people get comfortable with your noise. They get used to you doing the work, you reaching out first, you breaking the tension, you smoothing things over. So when you stop, it's not just silence, they feel it's absence. And that absence is powerful, because when you no longer show up the way you always have, they're left with themselves, with their own resistance, with their own emotional avoidance, and that's uncomfortable. But here's the key. Your job is not to rescue them from that discomfort. Your job is to allow the silence to do what your words never could, force reflection. When you go quiet, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, you shift the energy completely. You stop negotiating your worth through conversation. You stop that is trying to be understood by someone who isn't ready to listen. It speaks volumes. It says, I've shown up, I've made it clear, and now I'm letting go of the part of me that believes I have to fight to be seen. Letting the silence speak is one of the most courageous things you can do when you love someone who pulls away, because it means resisting the urge to prove yourself. It means breaking the pattern of pursuing someone who keeps teaching you that connection only happens on their terms. It means trusting that if something is real, it won't disappear in your absence. It will find its way back with intention. And if it doesn't, that's clarity. That's not loss, it's truth. And truth is always a gain, even when it hurts. There is a profound difference between silence that punishes and silence that protects. You're not punishing anyone. By pulling back, you're protecting your peace. You're creating space to breathe, to regroup, to reconnect with yourself after trying so hard to hold a connection together. That's not cold, that's wise. The people who care, who truly care, will feel that silence. They will notice the shift. They will ask themselves why the dynamic changed. And if they're ready, they'll step forward. And if they don't, then they weren't listening to your words in the first place, and silence just made it undeniable. Let it speak. Let it echo louder than your explanations. Let it call them to rise or release them to go. Let it do what your love alone couldn't make them choose. Because when you stop filling the silence, you finally make room for someone else to speak, to act, to meet you halfway. And that's where real connection either begins or clearly ends. Either way you win, because you stop speaking over your own needs just to keep something alive that wasn't breathing on its own. There's something deeply unsettling about being around someone who is grounded in themselves when you haven't done the inner work. When you're used to chaos, when you're used to avoidance, someone standing in clarity feels threatening not because they're doing anything wrong, but because they aren't confused. And that kind of certainty makes it impossible to hide. Clarity triggers avoidance because it disrupts the game. The push-pull, the ambiguity, the gray areas where they've learned to survive. Clarity doesn't leave space for those. It doesn't chase, it doesn't beg, it doesn't mold itself to be accepted. Clarity simply says, this is who I am, this is what I need, this is what I will and will not accept, and you built your identity on staying in control by staying distant. That level of transparency feels like exposure. You're not triggering them because you're needy. You're triggering them because you're certain. And certainty means they can't hide in the shadows anymore. It means their emotional avoidance gets called out without a word. Your clarity becomes a mirror they can't turn away from. Clarity is powerful because it isn't loud, it's unshakable. You don't have to raise your voice to make someone feel it. You just have to know who you are and what you deserve. That kind of self-possession is rare. And for someone who is used to emotional ambiguity, it feels like pressure. But it's not pressure, it's presence. You see, when you're unclear, people get to project whatever they want onto you. They can assume you'll wait. They can assume you'll tolerate inconsistency. They can assume you'll keep accepting the bare minimum. But when you get clear, truly clear, those assumptions fall apart. You become a boundary they didn't expect, a standard they weren't prepared for. And clarity doesn't beg anyone to stay. That's the part that stings. Because when someone avoids closeness, they're used to the other person doing the emotional heavy lifting. But when you say, here's what I need, I'm not going to chase you for it, it forces them into a choice. They can either grow or go. And both options require them to leave their comfort zone. That's what makes your clarity so magnetic. It's not demanding, but it's non-negotiable. It doesn't wait for approval. It doesn't shrink to accommodate. And it doesn't disguise truth and softness to make it easier to swallow. It stands firm. And in doing so, it forces everyone around you to either meet you with the same energy or reveal that they never could. Avoidants aren't used to being met with clarity. They're used to emotional fog, where they can pull back without consequence, where they can say, I need space and still expect connection, where they can keep 1 foot in and 1 foot out without ever being held accountable for the tension they create. But when you bring clarity into that space, you eliminate the fog. You turn the lights on. You make it impossible for them to keep pretending they don't know what they're doing. And yes, that will absolutely trigger them. But that's not your burden to manage. That's their discomfort to sit with. You didn't create the fear. They've just never had to face it this directly and tell you your clarity is not the problem. It's the solution they weren't ready for. And if they can't handle that, if they push you away, blame you, or make you feel like you're asking for too much, that's not rejection, it's revelation. That's the moment you stop wondering and start knowing. Because clarity doesn't chase validation, it creates freedom. And freedom doesn't come from keeping people, it comes from keeping yourself. You spent so long trying to prove your presence, try to show that you were reliable, patient, consistent, that you were someone worth staying for. You over-explained, you softened your boundaries, you waited in the gaps where their effort should have been. You showed up even when it hurt, and still it never felt like enough. Because with someone avoidant, presence isn't always what they respond to. It's absence that shakes them. It's absence that reveals your value in ways your presence never could. When someone has grown comfortable with emotional distance, they take closeness for granted. Your care becomes background noise. Your effort becomes expectation. They don't see the weight of your love because they've never had to live without it. And so they mistake your emotional labor as something guaranteed until it's gone, until you step back, not to manipulate, not to punish, but because you finally realize that staying visible in someone's life doesn't always make you seen. Your absence has power because it creates space for awareness. It interrupts the cycle. It forces the other person to feel the void that your effort once filled. Suddenly the texts don't come. The check-ins stop. The emotional safety net disappears. And what's left? Silence and a chance for them to actually sit with it, to confront the reality they kept ignoring, that someone was pouring into them, holding them, loving them deeply, and they let it slip through their fingers. This isn't about playing games. It's about breaking patterns, because as long as you keep showing up for someone who avoids intimacy, they'll keep avoiding. Why? Because they never feel the consequence of their emotional withdrawal. They never have to face what it means to lose you. And sometimes that's the only thing that wakes them up, not a speech, not a heartfelt message, but the absence of your energy. That absence becomes a mirror. It reflects what they've been avoiding about themselves. It brings their fears into focus. Maybe for the first time they have to ask, why do I feel this ache? Why do I miss someone I kept at arm's length? And those questions, if they're brave enough to face them, become the doorway to growth. But here's the deeper truth. Even if they don't wake up, you do. Your absence gives you back to yourself. It lets you heal from the exhaustion of trying to be enough for someone who wasn't even emotionally present. It restores the energy you were pouring into someone else's wounds. It reminds you that you don't have to earn love by proving your worth. You only have to protect your peace by honoring it. And the people who are meant for you, they won't need to lose you to see you. They'll value you in real time, not in hindsight. But for the ones who need that wake-up call, your absence might be the only thing that finally hits. Because when the room gets quiet, when your light is no longer lighting their way, they finally see how much you were doing. And that realization, that's the moment they either rise or confirm what you already sensed. You are not cold for walking away. You are not selfish for choosing distance after being ignored. You are not heartless for removing your love from a space where it wasn't being held with care. You are powerful, and your absence is not just the end of something, it's the beginning of everything you've been waiting to receive. Let them feel it, not because you want to hurt them, but because you finally remembered you were never meant to stay invisible just to be loved. As we wrap up this journey, remember that your worth is not defined by how much you give to someone else, but by how much you value yourself. The path to a fulfilling relationship starts with knowing your own power, setting boundaries, and letting go of the need for value. Trust that when you stand in your truth and honor your own needs, the right people will rise to meet you there. Thank you for taking this time to invest in yourself. Stay strong, stay true, and never settle for anything less than the love and respect you deserve. Goodbye for now, and take care on your journey ahead.